Empress Sisi is one of the most beautiful women of the 19th century. She's known not only for her ethereal beauty, but for her rebellious, free-spirited nature. However, her life was no fairy tale. It was a life of glittering misery that ended in a tragic assassination. Beyond the crown, she is Elisabeth Amalie Eugénie, better known by her childhood nickname, Sisi. Interestingly, she married into the House of Habsburg and walked the same palace halls where Marie Antoinette once lived as a child, though nearly a century apart. But Sisi was never meant to be an empress. Her story began with a twist of fate. Let's first travel back to 1853 to the resort of Bad Ischl, Upper Austria. Sisi was unexpectedly proposed to by her cousin, 23-year-old Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria, when she was only 15. The emperor was supposed to marry her 19-year-old sister Helene, who had been carefully prepared for the role of empress. But the moment he saw Sisi, he was charmed. He ignored his mother's arrangement, refusing to marry anyone else. After an 8-month engagement, the now 16-year-old Sisi married Franz Joseph in 1854 and became Empress of Austria. You may not be surprised that Sisi had difficulty adapting to the strict court life. She was raised in a much more informal household, and this was largely because of her father, Duke Maximilian Joseph, in Bavaria. He was an unusual nobleman who preferred circuses and music over his duties, and he let Sisi spend much of her childhood outdoors, riding horses and hiking in the Bavarian countryside. But don't get the wrong idea and assume he was a wonderful father. He actually was almost never at home and even had several children from his affairs. Just a few weeks into the marriage, she began to suffer from severe health issues, including a persistent cough and anxiety attacks. Sisi's mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie, was a powerful figure and also her aunt, often called the only man at the Hofburg court. She caused great stress for Sisi. Just 10 months after her marriage, the 17-year-old Sisi gave birth to her first daughter in 1855. Her mother-in-law immediately took the baby away to raise as her own, as she considered Sisi a silly young mother. And she even named the child after herself without asking Sisi. When Sisi's second daughter, Gisela, was born a year later, she was taken away as well. One day, she found a pamphlet on her desk with harsh words saying that a queen's only destiny was to provide an heir and stay out of politics. It's widely believed this was a deliberate message from her mother-in-law. You can imagine the immense pressure Sisi felt receiving such a cold warning. At 19, Sisi decided to challenge her mother-in-law and reclaim her children. She insisted on bringing her 2 young daughters on an official visit to Hungary in 1857, and her husband backed her decision. During this trip, she felt a deep connection to the country and even started to learn Hungarian. In turn, she was adored by the Hungarian people. However, the trip ended in tragedy when both of her daughters fell ill. While Gisela recovered, Sisi's 2-year-old firstborn, Sophie, passed away, sending the empress into a deep depression. From then on, Sisi turned away from motherhood and grew distant from her surviving daughter Gisela. The very next year, in 1858, the 20-year-old empress finally gave birth to a son, Crown Prince Rudolf. But his upbringing was also immediately taken over by his grandmother. By the time Rudolf was just 2 years old, the stress had taken a toll on Sisi's body. In 1860, on her doctor's advice to treat her lung illness, Sisi fled Vienna for the island of Madeira. She returned to the court occasionally, but whenever she was back in Vienna, she fell ill again. With her health as a way out, she escaped her imperial duties and the intimacy of her marriage. Perhaps seeking a sense of control she lacked elsewhere, Sisi became obsessed with her own beauty. In 19th century standards, women preferred a thin waist through corseting, and Sisi took this to a level that was considered radical even back then. As for the exact measurement, I'd love to tell you the number, but YouTube is very strict on this. Just know it was a silhouette that shocked the world. At her height of 172 centimeters, she insisted on maintaining a frame so light it would be considered dangerous by any modern standard. As for her diet, she favored liquids like milk, clear broth, or even the juice pressed from raw beef. One of the few indulgences she did allow herself was violet sorbet and candied violets. Her daily routine was intense. She would take a cold shower in the morning and an olive oil bath at night. Before sleeping, she would sometimes wear a mask made from raw beef or crushed strawberries and honey. She even skipped the pillow and slept on a hard, firm bed just to keep her back perfectly straight. Her chestnut, floor-length hair was legendary. Washing it was a full-day process that happened every 2 to 3 weeks using a mixture of raw eggs and cognac. Her hairdresser, Fanny Feifalik, had to brush this long hair for hours, terrified of breaking a single strand. To survive Sisi's rage, she came up with a trick. She hid the fallen hairs on a piece of tape under her apron, just to show the Empress a perfectly clean brush. Sisi also had a strong preference for being surrounded by good-looking people, selecting only ladies-in-waiting who she considered beautiful. As for exercise, she did hours of riding and was even considered the best horsewoman in the world. She also trained hard at home. In Hofburg Palace in Vienna, you can see gymnastics rings she had installed in the doorway of her imperial apartments. After Austria's defeat by Prussia in 1866, the empire weakened. At this very moment, Sisi played a key role in easing tensions between Austria and Hungary, a cause she had long supported. Her influence was key in creating the Austro-Hungarian Compromise. She was the only one both sides trusted, using her close friendship with a Hungarian count to personally persuade the emperor. This led to their coronation in Buda in 1867. It ended a decades-long conflict and marked Sisi's greatest political success. At the same time, Count Gyula Andrassy, whom Sisi favoured, became the first Hungarian prime minister. As part of the bargain, Sisi made a personal concession and agreed to have another child after years of avoiding pregnancy. So, their daughter, Archduchess Marie Valerie, was born in Hungary in 1868, earning the nickname the Hungarian Child. Marie Valerie was the only child Sisi raised herself, pouring all her love onto her. She took the young girl with her everywhere on her travels to escape the Vienna court. But as Marie's own diaries later revealed, this intense affection was often suffocating. By her late 30s, Sisi's obsession with perfection turned into a fear of losing her youthful, slender image. She began to avoid all photographs and portraits. This is why most of her later portraits were actually based on her younger self, capturing a beauty that was frozen in time. In fact, to protect her image, she was rarely seen without a fan or a leather parasol to hide her face from the public. As she spent less and less time in Vienna, she knew her husband was lonely. Feeling guilty for that, Sisi introduced her husband to the actress Katharina Schratt. She soon became Franz Joseph's companion, but there is no solid evidence that it was more than platonic. In January 1889, at a hunting lodge called Mayerling, a terrible tragedy occurred. Sisi's son, the 30-year-old Crown Prince Rudolf, was found dead alongside his 17-year-old mistress, Baroness Mary Wetzera. Evidence later confirmed they took their own lives together. At the time, Rudolf was married to Princess Stephanie of Belgium and had a daughter. So, what was the relationship like between Sisi and her son? When Rudolf was just a 6-year-old boy, he was suffering under a brutal military education. Horrified, in 1865, Sisi issued an ultimatum to the emperor. She demanded that he change Rudolf's education to a liberal one, or she would leave the court forever. And remarkably, it worked. In Rudolf's eyes, Sisi was his saviour, and he idolized her. But Sisi was an emotionally absent mother. Desperate to escape the Austrian court, she travelled constantly, leaving him behind. Perhaps she loved her son in her own way, but the lack of contact meant that their bond was never truly close. This tragedy shattered the Empress. From that day on, she wore mostly black and travelled even more restlessly to flee from her grief. She found solace in Corfu, an island she had loved since her youth, and wandered from the mountains of Switzerland to the sands of North Africa. Though she was rarely in Vienna, she and Franz Joseph remained in contact through frequent and caring letters. Now, as we move our lens to 1898 in Geneva, Switzerland, we find the 60-year-old Empress wearing black and travelling. Suddenly, a man named Luigi Lucchini jumped out and struck her with a sharpened file. At that time, Sisi and her companion, Countess Stare, were walking along the lake to board a steamship. She collapsed for a moment, but was helped up by the Countess and continued to walk onto the ship. They later found things were much more serious than they thought. When Sisi's corset was cut open to help her breathe, the fatal wound was revealed. Starai asked if she was in pain. Sisi replied, "No." She then asked, "What has happened?" before losing consciousness forever. But why did this assassination happen? Luigi was an Italian anarchist. His original target was the Duke of Orléans, but he found out the Duke had already left town earlier than he planned. So, when a local newspaper revealed that the Empress of Austria was in the city, Luigi switched his focus to her. He just wanted to kill a royal and didn't care who it was. After a lifetime of trying to escape her royal title, Sisi was killed simply for being a royal. When Emperor Franz Joseph learned of her death, he reportedly whispered, "You will never know how much I loved her." Her husband lived for another 18 years. With their son gone, the throne passed to his nephew, Franz Ferdinand, whose assassination in 1914 triggered the First World War. Was Sisi a tragic victim or an empress who abandoned her duties? In her diary, Sisi questioned the marriage vows she was forced to make as a teenager, wondering how anyone could expect a child to make a promise like that for an entire lifetime. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please like and subscribe to help me bring more history to life. This is Time Travel Owl, and thank you for travelling with me today.